For billions of years, all life has relied on Earth's predictable rhythm of night and day. Humans have radically disrupted this cycle by artificially lighting up the night sky. The night skies above cities are hundreds, if not thousands of times brighter than 200 years ago, but we've all become accustomed to the safety and improved visibility that night street lighting brings. But have we ever stopped to ask, is all of this lighting just too much?
The ability to look down on the Earth at night with remote sensing from satellites is just a game changer in terms of our understanding of this problem.
Tucson, Arizona is famed for its dark skies. After sunset, the clear, arid conditions attract astronomers from across the United States. And its 3 observatories are an important part of the economy. So when local government decided to upgrade their street lighting, they were sure to call upon Dr. John Barantine, an astronomer whose many accomplishments include having an asteroid named after him.
They wanted to be sure that that project would not result in any damage to the astronomy enterprise. They did not want to increase the amount of this sky glow phenomenon, this scattered light in the night sky.
But for Dr. Barantine and his colleagues at the International Dark Sky Association, this is only one piece of a larger problem of light pollution.
When we get out of the atmosphere and look back at the Earth, that we can see the large-scale distribution of that light. And it really gives us a global picture. There's almost no part of the world that isn't affected by it in one way or another. And that the scale and scope of it, combined with what we know from laboratory and field research, is really what's telling us about the significance of it as an environmental problem. There's some indication that that daily rhythm of light and dark was already imprinted on the DNA of some of the earliest single-celled organisms that existed on Earth. When we disrupt that, we create all kinds of problems for wildlife, from disrupting their circadian rhythms to changing the way that they find mates, forage for food, the way they move about at night on the surface of the Earth. And that artificial light we're putting into the environment is very attractive to them. Like the old cliche about a moth being drawn to a flame, it can be fatal to them.
The team at Dark Sky Institute saw an opportunity to make a local difference by helping Tucson to create smarter, more responsive street lighting.
So the problem that we're trying to solve is the excess amount of artificial light at night that is being emitted into our nighttime environment. And that is light that's caused by humans in one way or another. But we think we can mitigate the harm while allowing for the benefits, and ultimately that is our aim.
So how did you go about that?
So they used a combination of some of the best available LED technology, as well as this smart city approach, or the smart lighting, to actively control that light that can vary characteristics such as the brightness of that light, the duration of the night in which the light is operated. We can change characteristics like its color. So early on in the evening, when you have a lot more people outside, there's more traffic on the roads, we know that there's some benefit to having colors that more resemble daylight. But later in the night, when there isn't as much traffic, there's not as much justification for that. And that those daylight kind of colors are what we know to be harmful, especially to biology.
The majority of outdoor lighting is wasted, reflecting off surfaces and spilling over into the night sky. This lost light refracts in the atmosphere, creating what's known as sky glow. Smart lighting aims to address these issues by shielding and targeting lights to point just where light is needed, reducing the output and dimming lights after a certain time, or changing the light to longer wavelengths such as yellow or red that are less visible to wildlife. With the new controllable streetlights, Dr. Barantine was finally able to address a fundamental question.
In a typical city, how much of the city's light emissions is represented by street lighting? And there was so much guesswork to that simply because it was hard to design an experiment that could get you that answer.
He approached the city with an extraordinary plan to simultaneously measure the light in Tucson from the ground and from space.
We came up with this idea of approaching the city and asking them if they would be willing to make deliberate but temporary changes to the lighting on just a few nights, and to do it at midnight, so it was an hour when there wouldn't be very much traffic on the streets and there would be very little impact to residents. To time it also with the time when the satellite flies over, which is around 1 a.m. local time. So the change would be made, and then the satellite would fly over shortly thereafter, and we would make the measurement simultaneously from orbit and from the ground.
Amazingly, the city agreed, in no small part because their own engineers were interested in the results.
From their perspective, it was a valuable test in that not only did it give us useful scientific data, but it gave them very useful engineering data about how the control system was performing.
Over 10 nights, the brightness of settings for about 14,000 of the city's 19,500 streetlights were adjusted, dimming them down to 30% on some nights and brightening them up to 100% on others. Dr. Barantine started by taking measurements of the brightness of the sky.
We typically measure the zenith, which is the point at which we would call the top of the sky.
I'm just going to fire off a couple of readings here.
We have a number of different kinds of ways of sensing that light, and they vary from, for example, calibrated cameras, just plain digital photographic cameras that are calibrated for the purpose of making these very sensitive measurements. And we use fisheye lenses so that we can view the entire sky in one frame. We also have some very simple electronic devices that can be handheld. This is an example of one here that's called a sky quality meter, that we literally just point at the sky and press a button, and within a few seconds we have a reading on the display in a calibrated unit that gives us a real valid scientific measurement.
At the same time, images were taken from space using a specialist satellite that can detect electromagnetic radiation in the spectral window equivalent to visible light.
It's only been in about the last 10 years or so that we have had really cutting-edge technology in space that lets us see even very faint artificial lights on the night side of the Earth. And it really gives us a global picture. It's one thing for us to be in a particular location on Earth and look up at the night sky, but it's only when we get out of the atmosphere and look back at the Earth that we can see the large-scale distribution of that light, and we can measure it in terms of quantity.
The data collected from orbit and the ground was then compared to readings taken on nights when the streetlights were not adjusted. The results confirmed that the smart lighting was a success.
Our research showed a measurable decrease in the amount of light in the night sky over the city that was consistent with expectations, so that we know that the lighting design produced approximately the effect that we wanted.
As well as reducing the amount of light pollution, the smart lighting had environmental benefits and financial benefits for the city council.
The energy cost is lower, the carbon emission cost is lower, etc. The astronomers seem to be happy with it. The city officials calculated that over the expected roughly 20-year lifetime of our new street lighting system, that the smart controls will not only pay for themselves, but probably will save the city on the order of between $1 million and $2 million in operating costs.
But the data wasn't entirely what they expected. To their surprise, street lighting was a smaller part of the overall picture than originally thought.
We think that the total emission represented by our street lighting system is probably less than 20%, and it may be closer to 10 to 15%. And that really then changes our approach to dealing with the remainder, which we think are predominantly private sources of lighting on the exteriors of homes and businesses, car parks, illuminated signs, similar kinds of lighting.
The results are amazing, but with lights being dimmed at night, were there any concerns from residents about safety?
We don't want people to feel that something has been taken away from them. We don't want them to feel unsafe. Rather, we want to be sure that those lighting systems are operated such that they put the right amount of light in the right places and times when people are present and they need it. A lot of people are very worried about their transit between places at night, their safety, especially women. I think those fears are genuine. I think we should listen to people who say that they're afraid and respond appropriately. And in some cases, that means that we should use light. We should use it in a way that creates genuine safety and not merely the perception of safety. Those are different things.
So, as well as implementing smart lighting technology, is there anything else we can do to address other sources of light pollution?
I think everyone has a part to play if they choose to do so. And obviously, we've been talking about what cities can do and the type of lighting that's typically most significant and under the control of a city is its public lighting, like its street lighting. And so through good public policy, adequate technical information, educating the city officials and the engineers who have to make the decisions, we can help the cities play their part in this. But everybody, wherever they live, can do something useful to help solve this problem. And in the case of typical homeowners, it's as simple as looking at the lighting on the exterior of your home and asking questions like, is that lighting useful? Is it necessary? If it's not, can it be turned off?
So we can all do something to help reduce the amount of light pollution, not only benefiting wildlife and the environment, but also ourselves.
I think we're missing a connection that humans have had to the cosmos for our entire length of time on this planet, long before there was written history or language or any of these things that we could have used to try to express what that is. And it's a connection that makes us question how we got here, why we're here. For some people, it's a sort of communion with the divine. For other people, it's the sort of a peak of intellectual pursuit. And to think that there was a time until very recently when everybody had access to this, absolutely everybody. And that only in the last several decades or maybe a century or so, we have lost that connection that was once so immediate and that we all had, I think is a really striking indicator of how much we have changed the planet itself in such a short period of time.